Well, it's been another busy day in Westminster, and now Parliament is clocking off for the night, and the government is going to bed. But in London's clubs, the night is just getting started.
You know, get into the vibe of it, join in a bit. Looks very similar to the Sweets, really. My vision became quite distorted. It was quite hallucinogenic.
So it's not just the DJ that keeps spirits high. Club drugs that mimic the effects of illegal drugs like ecstasy are being used across the capital, but with one important difference. These pills are legal. Legal highs have been around for a long while, but in recent years they've become increasingly effective and prevalent.
I was at a music festival and they were for sale, quite sort of readily available really, and sort of actually I remember it being the place they sold tea and coffee.
Their rise in the UK is a story about time. It takes time for the government to come up with new legislation, and it's time which gives the underground chemists the opportunity to develop new legal highs. Drugs policy revolves around two key pieces of legislation.
This is the Misuse of Drugs Act. It covers banned substances like cocaine, but the legal highs aren't mentioned in this legislation. This is the Medicines Act. It regulates pharmaceuticals like aspirin or ibuprofen, but it only covers chemicals that are intended for human consumption. So traders try to evade this legislation by claiming that their legal highs are plant feeder.
The medical regulation agencies say, you know, if it's got a psychoactive effect, as far as we're concerned, it's a medicine, end of story, so therefore it needs to be licensed, and if you don't get a license, we'll track you down and send you to court. Although that's not much of a reality because they've only got a handful of inspectors.
So to outlaw the current contingent of legal highs, the government would have to control the relevant chemicals under the Misuse of Drugs Act. Delays create loopholes, and these are the gaps in the net which many club drugs are now falling through. Camden. It's one of the places now doing a roaring trade in the drugs that exploit a slow government response. I tried to discuss this with local dealers, but they didn't want to talk about it.
So I've just been off camera to buy this for £10. You can see on the back that it describes itself as plant feeder, but this is very profitable fertiliser indeed. Experts estimate that this might have cost only 20p to manufacture, but that's a 5,000% markup.
John Ramsey monitors drugs in the UK. I asked him how the latest legal high craze began.
But BZP opened the floodgates. I mean, this really resulted in compounds being sold in high street shops, which had never happened before.
BZP is the active ingredient in a range of legal alternatives to ecstasy. When it got here from New Zealand at the end of the 90s, it came with a health warning. Side effects were said to range from heart palpitations to seizures.
I can't say my experience was wholly a good one, but maybe that might be something to do with the fact that I don't do drugs, and so therefore maybe I wasn't expecting the experience to be quite so intense. But I suffered from quite strong heart palpitations. That sort of sense of paranoia and nervousness was quite strong.
This report from the European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction drew some of this evidence together, and amid fears about the dangers of the drug, the EU decided to act.
In March 2008, the EU called on member states to impose effective legal controls on BZP within a year.
So the UK government was obliged to control BZP.
Within 12 months?
Within 12 months, yes, and that 12 months is almost up. But I think BZP is close to being controlled in the UK as we speak.
And are the government going to make the deadline?
I don't know. I don't know. You'll have to speak to them about that.
They're not going to make the deadline. That was the Drug Strategy Unit at the Home Office, and they told me that no legislation is going to be passed on BZP until the autumn.
This is the first time that the EU has had to prompt the UK government into action over its drug laws. The UK has fallen behind its European partners because the government are trying to draft wide-ranging legislation to preempt the development of future drugs. This approach should mean that other drugs which are similar to BZP are also outlawed before they can be abused. But already anticipating a ban on BZP under the Misuse of Drugs Act, a new generation of legal club drugs has emerged, such as methadone and mephedrone, and they're growing in popularity. Like BZP, these substances are cleverly designed to deliver the effects of ecstasy without being covered by current legislation. This is the chemical structure of ecstasy. This is mephedrone, and this is methylone. As you can see, the difference between the structures is tiny.
Yes, there are loopholes. There will always be loopholes because as soon as we control one group of substances, then a clever clandestine chemist will think of other things to produce. And I think it's a process which will continue.
But every loophole is another opportunity to add to the substances already on sale in UK shops, and as the current trend continues, that process is likely to speed up. By the time the Home Office get round to banning BZP, the next generation of legal highs will have acquired a large market share, and they'll have been in the shops for months, untested, unregulated, and dangerous. Do you have any idea what kind of consequences, health consequences, they might have?
No, the problem is they're untested they're chemicals rather than pharmaceuticals. So they haven't been researched for efficacy or safety by anybody. And although the modifications to the molecules are quite small, they can have profound effects. And the effects could be completely unpredictable. So there's a real risk that people taking these things might be exposing themselves to dangers which we can't foresee.
I thought, okay, this is obviously safe because it's not illegal. It's it's sold next to the Kit Kat, so it can't be, dangerous.
But the priority for the designers of these drugs is making them legal, not making them safe. We asked the government why they found it so difficult to come up with a speedy response to these new substances, but they failed to get back to us in time.
If the government continues to react as slowly as it has done over drugs like BZP, more and more chemicals that simulate the effects of illegal substances will emerge. So the risks associated with this new generation of legal highs will be multiplied until the government changes its approach.